morning. I hope you all are doing so well. Thank you so much for being here. So, there's a theme going on, which I'm feeling to call the sacred re-emergence. We're being asked, we're being called back into this 3D physical reality. After all we've been through, all of the lessons, all of the work we've been doing, it really truly now is about re-emerging into the world with our newfound understanding and knowing of our sacredness and our divinity. This is a completely different range of work now, a different way of being through our human that we're being asked to step into. And part of what is going on at this time is there really is a rearranging in the mind. The human mind cannot comprehend of this, even though in the past, up until this point, in theory, we've known, right? We can drop into our field, we drop into our heart space, we go into meditation, we're in our stillness, and we know, we can feel in the energy the truth of what is. And yet, because of the disparity between what we were feeling inside and what we were seeing externally, there was a huge gap. And so now, as we're moving into this space within time, where we're being asked to step back out into this 3D reality with this, it's not even like a mental consciousness, it's more of it's a body consciousness that we have. So we're having to bridge that gap now between what we know to be true and the reality. And really, it is within the body, right? So this is where I've really been struggling, which is, okay, in theory, I knew all this was supposed to be true, but it wasn't. And so it felt more like a dream, a hope, a wish about the future, what the future would be like. And now that it has arrived, I cannot, if I'm in my mind, I can't even talk about it. I kind of lose my thought process. There's like a void there in that mind space. Someone reminded me of this idea of connecting to the mind through the heart, and that's really what we're being forced to do right now. So it's a very strange, dreamlike quality right now, a little bit disorienting, a little bit kind of disassociative, as we go through this shift and this merge. And yet, I think the way I've been trying to approach it, or the way I've kind of figured out how to approach this at this point, is to really have to be in the body in order to manage my way through this, in order to experience my way through this. And we've always said this, right? Ascension, whatever you want to call it, it's an experiential journey, and it's not something that can be understood through the mind. And yet, because of that gap, we were very much kind of in the mind of the, let's say, sacred theory of what was supposed to be. And yet the goal always was to fully embody this sacredness and this divinity and this transition. And really, that's probably the best way to describe this. This is a transitioning process, really coming in to this new presence. And it's amazing, and yet, again, a bit disorienting. So, and this really is the sacred merge, right? Of course, a lot of us are on that kind of sacred partnership path. And whether or not the individual has shown up, this is the sacred merge. And I always said, and it's just funny to me now, as I'm going through this and I'm like there's so many things that I said in the past that I'm like, oh yeah, I remember saying this and I didn't really know why. Again, in theory and energetically, that's what I was feeling, and that's what made sense at the time. But now it's taking those things and putting it into practice and using it in my everyday physical experience. In so many ways, I feel like I was just born yesterday when it comes to physical things. It's the strangest feeling. And so one of the things I always said was that the light leaves no stone unturned. And that's very, very true. And so wherever we still have these weird distortions or karmic ties or whatever they may be, it's all going to come up again. So we're going through another wave of this. There's only so much you can do energetically in your field up to a point where you need that physical mirror, that physical experience to really shift and clear out the deep, deep core distortions. And that really comes through the sacred partnerships. Because, again, yes, we can do it ourselves. We can seek therapy, we can seek counseling, whatever it may be, healers to be that mirror for us. And yet there's still a bit of a distance with that, because it's not fully in your physical reality where this is actually a part of my life and I need to make this shift because it's right here, right? You go to the therapist's office for an hour a week or whatever it might be, and you go home and you're in your own kind of, you can, let's say, recede back into your own world, into your own energy, and kind of keep that all at a distance, right? But so when these partnerships come in, that's not the case at all. It's in your energy field 24/7. So it's a bit like getting a roto-rooter, kind of experience in your energy, and it doesn't stop. And what is that really? That is the light body activation, right? And the light body activates, and it starts to clear out the distortion in the cellular field, in the human, in the biology, whatever's being held in the DNA. So, in theory, wonderful. Bring in the relationship. Let's do this, right? Let's do New Earth, whatever we want to think. But there's a process, again, transition, this re-emergence that we have to go through. And truly, I think the one thing I'm learning through all of this, it's so important, our perception, it's so important the perspective we approach this with, right? Because after living in this reality, in this existence as a light being, not knowing it, right? Going through all of this trauma and distortion, and then labeling ourselves and holding all of the shame and guilt about the way our life hasn't worked out according to what we see in the reality, right? We had to base our understanding of what was wrong with us on these distorted messages, right? In order to stay sane and to survive this existence. So we created these narratives around who we are so that we didn't lose our human mind capacity. But it was always at odds then with our inner world, with our light. And so now as we start to re-emerge, we're having to flip all of that, right? So it's like that inner knowing of who we are now is actually becoming this physical reality. And the rest of that is kind of receding and dropping out. So it's really challenging to understand through the mind at all, because the mind was not necessarily built to experience this transition. And there's no kind of let's say predecessory experience of this in our human consciousness. So what is very much true is that we are an embodiment of the Christ light. And so what that really means, again, no stone is left unturned. Anywhere we have anything that is contrary to the light is going to come to the surface. And so the best way, it's really, really hard. I'm like trying to drop into my heart, and yet how do I talk from a logical place? It's impossible. And it's distracting, right? Like I said, it's early in the morning. There's a lot of traffic on the road. I'm not used to having the lights on in here. I don't like fluorescent lights. And yet this is the reality, right? We are re-emerging into this and learning, allowing the light within us to shift and sort and find its position. That infusion and that stillness and that clearing that's coming through right now. But I was talking with someone the other day, and I realized, right, like this is really happening. And so I can either come from a place of, oh my God, I'm so ashamed about the way my life has been, and this is awful, and look at all these things I have to clear now and figure out and sort in the physical, take care of all these problems, because we're not meant to be here and suffer just because, we're light beings and don't know how to work with the distorted system. We're not meant to suffer. And yet everything is only just now in the process of kind of flipping over and reversing, right? So there's this weird energy of like what I want to say, and I keep circling around it, it will come. But this space of transition, I keep getting this image, of we've been so hidden. It's like hiding, in the upper rooms or in these, gathering together in these dark places where we had to hide from those energies that were always hunting us, out to get us. But now we've been going through this activation. All of this light is coming in, and what's happening is all of the light beings are re-emerging out into the world. And this is becoming the dominant, really the ownership of this earth, right? We've been living on a prison planet, subjected to control. A really fantastic system, like it's amazing how well it worked to control the planet, and yet we're here, and this is the work, and this has always been the mission. And so this emergence of all of these beings of light now going out into the world, and humanity is not really going to understand what has hit them. But this is what I'm seeing, people going back to the job force, going back to old places that they may have removed themselves from, with this newfound understanding of who they are, and now infusing the light in a much different way, because in the past we were in this kind of de-evolution or this negative reversal spin, so that every time we tried to emerge as our true selves, we would get hit, and it would be like almost worse than if we had just kind of sat there and gone along with society, right? So we were constantly taking these hits in our fields, and that's just not the case anymore. So as we start to work with our light and we start to process, what's happening is that light is not dissipating and it's not leaking out anymore. So it's actually starting to build within our own field. And as that happens, there's massive clearings that are happening, right? So all of these things going on simultaneously, whereas before we're so used to getting the leaking out and the negative spin, and now it's staying, and if we're not kind of consciously aware of what's happening, it can be shocking, right? So it's like, oh, in the past I would have expected this to happen, and now it's not. And yet, so there's this kind of increased light capacity in the field. And it's a bit disorienting because we're not used to having power, not used to feeling like we have any effect on the world around us. And yet now we are. And so it's like, wait, what? It's like getting your magic back. And so then the fear that can come up because we're experiencing that effect of the power now. So little by little, the light body is building. We're re-emerging back into this world, which has always rejected us, where we've never maybe felt successful at what we've done, or however it's played out for us, right? Even if we were successful, we felt the shame and the guilt and the I don't deserve and all of this kind of stuff. So even if physically things seemed okay, internally we were a nightmare. But all this is shifting and reversing now. So it's like taking, it's like having to breathe pure oxygen in a way. It's like we're not used to it. The head spins a little, like it's not really conducive to our body, this new atmosphere. So the body, right, shifting, learning how to be in this place. But again, this was always the mission, and this has always been our purpose. And so don't freak out. And I say that from personal experience because the tendency is, right, the body, the mind is programmed according to what it receives. And so we know this, right? It's if we take on these negative ideas, these negative ways of being and thinking, it trains our mind and actually then starts to distort our energy field, right? So, but we're not in that place anymore. We've reached this threshold where we don't have to do that. So our old habits and patterns, for myself, like shaming myself and let's say guilting myself was a way of kind of explaining why my life looked like shit. Even though I didn't necessarily feel that way, it was like, well, but if I'm comparing myself to this, like, what's my explanation for why my life hasn't worked out, right? It's like, oh, I'm so whatever. Like, I just feel awful because everything I try, like, so it was a defense mechanism, but also something that added to this kind of negative spiral in my energy field. So I'm having to relearn that, you know what, this is happening. I can't stop this activation that's going on inside of me. It's going to happen whether I want it to or not. And am I going to create more resistance and more pain and suffering by taking on that negative mindset now? And again, it's a way to protect ourselves, right? Because, well, if it doesn't work out this time, at least I can say, go back into that old mantra of like, yeah, I can't, like, the anxiety, whatever it is, kind of as a way of explaining why my life sucks, but it's like, we don't have to do that anymore. And we deserve, this is our birthright. This is what we're here to do and be, and always has been. And yet again, we took on all of that as a way of being in order to make sense and to not feel insane and to try and understand what was going on when we were still kind of working through all of that past karma and trauma and all the things we were here to clear. So really needing to shift my approach to this experience. It's like I can either enjoy the process of the clearing and look at it for what it is, which is exactly what was always supposed to happen, or I can come at it from a very negative perspective, which is to be in that shame and that guilt and say, well, yeah, really sucked, and I really hope this works out, but I don't know if it will because the past has always been the past, and all this kind of stuff, right? So it's really about embracing now the truth of our divinity, which we know, and allowing that to step forward through us, through ourselves, through biology. And how do we do that? It's in the mind, right? I've always said the mind is the beginning and the end of our experience. Yes, we can't control our experience through our mind with our thought, but we control the human experience of our energy field, right? We're having this energetic experience, and can we get the human body now on board with that? So using all of these things that we have learned to say, okay, here we are, and can I focus my light here? Right? I've always said, especially with this whole thing we've been through with this prison system, this dark mother energy, right? It's like negativity, we have to recognize negativity, darkness is all distortion. So if it's not feeling like it's neutral or from this place of love and compassion, it's distortion, and it's not true. Like, it's not the truth of the light. So therefore it has to go, right? And so it's still very much that same experience now, actively doing this in the embodiment, which is to say, yeah, okay, that's not what we want, but let's not embrace what is negative, what is undesirable. And in fact, can we even maybe not even label that, right? It's just what is, and we can shift this. And actually, what is it that we desire and want? And let's go in that direction now. And again, this is a whole different landscape that we're working in. Whereas in the past, if we had tried this approach, probably it didn't work. And then we learned, okay, well, that didn't work. So now I have to say, find some excuse or use some kind of defense mechanism. And that created even more of a negative pull through our field, right? So this is really what we're doing in this transition process, is learning all of the ways that we have incapacitated ourselves. At the time, it was necessary to survive, right? These are survival techniques, mechanisms, whatever we want to call them. This is the transition process we're in right now. Realizing these things and releasing them out, and really having to put our light where our words are, right? Where our actions are. And to shift the way we've been trying to work it to survive, but now working it to thrive. And that's really the opportunity that is in front of us. And I can't even say it's an opportunity, right? It just is. This is happening. Again, we can't stop it. And so the worst thing we can do is use those old negative ways of being. That's going to create a lot of resistance. The shift is happening. It's going. It's already done, right? But it's just about getting the body and the human through this transition phase. And so can we enjoy it? Can we allow ourselves to enjoy it? This is the gift, right? And so this is where we're going to start to recognize the miracle of who we truly are, what we truly are, as we start to kind of apply these fundamental ways of being, which is to know yourself as the light, to know it's shifting, to know that no matter what happened in the past, how many times it happened in a negative way, that is not the way it's going anymore. It's kind of a hard pill to swallow. Sometimes it's really strange, right? You would think that when this comes in, it's going to be amazing and wonderful and just sunshine and rainbows everywhere. And it is, right? If we've been doing the work, which is to recognize this through the mind and to do those physical shifts through the body, to recognize where consciously as the human we've been holding into these patterns and causing ourselves more pain than was required. Even though, again, part of it was necessary. We have to see this now, how we have been doing this to ourselves. And to really start to root these things out. And again, if you have these kind of, counterpart, other people in your lives now, that's going to be shown to you, enormously. And it's challenging. It's really challenging because, again, our tendency is to hide, to isolate, to come internal, and to go into a negative spin. And yet, we just can't do that anymore. That causes actually more pain. Like I said, the light leaves no stone unturned. And I'm learning that, the learning curve It's really interesting. It's quickening, which is brilliant. But we're still learning, right, and figuring all of this out. And I guess that's why I'm kind of making this video too, because I've always said, it's going to be about full transparency, and are we able to be within our truth and our authenticity? We can complain about the way the world is and that people are posturing and hiding behind masks and all these things, but what's going to be shown to us first is where we are hiding, where we are doing all these things as well. I had a situation where I had something come up in my life where I was like, well, all right, I'm going to get this taken care of, so I don't necessarily need to tell this person about what's going on in my life, right? Like, no need to burden anyone with my problems. And yet, because it was going on inside of me and I was ruminating over it, right? Now, what's happening is we're connecting to people and they are just as, if not more sensitive than we are. And so whatever we think we're hiding, for whatever reason, good or bad, right? Like, not trying to burden someone, or if we're intentionally hiding something, these individuals are going to be able to feel that. These counterpart energies are exactly who we are. And so in my attempt to not burden the relationship with this issue, it was actually causing more distortion, because this individual could pick up that something was wrong. And because I wasn't saying what was going on, of course, we go into those, is it me, kind of, starting to feel self-conscious. Then you start to pull back, you start to reject the other person because you feel like they're rejecting you. And it creates this shadow, this kind of divide between you. Even though the intention was the exact opposite, right? Was to not create some kind of rift. So, I'm not going to talk about this because I don't want to create an issue. And yet it did anyway. So this is the brilliance of the light, right? It's like, no, utter and complete transparency of who you are and what's going on in your world. And if you're not, that shit's coming to the surface one way or another. So in many ways, we just can't get it wrong, right? We can't get it wrong. But what we can do is make it harder for ourselves to be in this transition. And truly, it's like, if you cannot bear your soul and your deepest, darkest secrets to the people around you, they're not at the same light capacity you are. And that's really a good gauge of who is going to be in your inner circle and who is not. Because those who are on the same path, those, let's say, potential partners, sacred partnerships, that's not going to be the issue, and in fact, partnership requires full transparency. And if you're able to keep secrets and it's not affecting your relationship, that's a good sign maybe it's not the right relationship for you. It's a complex. There's no, one way, because we each have our individual issues. And whoever shows up in our life is there to help us clear all of that fully and completely. So there's no kind of rule book as to how it's going to happen. But for sure, this concept of, no stone left unturned is very prevalent right now. And so if you see that and understand how that's working in your life, that's kind of a really good gauge I've been finding. What is really true for me? What is really true in relation to these people who are showing up? And when I try to cover things up and hide it back in my closet and push it away, is it causing more pain and resistance inside of me? And likewise, when I open up and share things and start to address issues that have been long kind of covered over, is there a clearing that comes through my field, right? And these clearings are massive. I had something happen just this morning with one of my kids. I noticed something and I said, wait a second, what's going on here? And they said, yeah, it's something I kind of wanted to talk to you about. And it's like we've been living in a fog in many ways, right? Or at least this is how I'm experiencing it. It's like I've been aware that there are issues that are unresolved. I don't know what the heck to do about them. Tried to whatever, but just couldn't. And now it's as if all of these shadows and these veils and these fogs are coming out of the field. And it's like for the first time you can actually get in there, right? So that before, I don't know if the energy was being dissipated with the shadow or what was going on. But now it's like there's direct energy contact. And when it hits, it's like an explosion through the field, right? And that's what I had happen to me today. It was like, and I've had this happen a couple times before where when you connect into a really deep kind of traumatic issue, it's like this kind of freight train coming out of the head. It's like clearing this trauma and places within the mind where there has been kind of this dark shadow or fog just kind of sequestering. It's like you don't have access to those memories or that experience or the way to even correct some of this stuff. And so as it comes out, it can be really, really intense. But again, this is the work of this transitional phase that we're in. And it's so profound. And I don't think that, again, even in my knowing through the light, through the energy, I don't think I ever would have thought this is actually how it would be. There was always a bit of feeling removed from it, like, okay, yeah, eventually I know things will change and things will be better. But it's this bridging phase, really, right? Of like having to walk through the transition, allowing the light to come through fully, allowing the release of this human experience. And it's not easy. It's not easy. But we can choose whether we're going to have fun with this, whether we're going to be in our joy, or whether we're going to try and make it a negative experience. But that's activating that kind of distorted empathic nature, right? The shame and the guilt and all the things we've taken on, and the darkness has gladly given to us in order to keep us in this negative kind of inert state, this kind of stasis that we've been in, sleepwalking, really. And I guess that's a good description, right? Finally being able to wake up fully into our light. So I think I'm going to leave this here. I hope you all are doing so well. I know it's a challenging time, but it's really exciting if we can allow ourselves to trust in this process. And I guess if you take anything from this video, it would be this, which is that this is happening, whether we want to believe it or not. The light body is activating. And so we can choose to be in the joy of it, or we can utilize our old patterns of survival and put ourselves in that place of resistance to the change. And this is where we can use our mind and our human consciousness to really dictate the kind of experience we're going to have. Are we going to be in the joy of it or the resistance? And that is all about our perspective. And that is the control we have over this experience as the human. This is where the mind comes into play. Knowing who we are as the light, knowing this is the process we're walking through, and how will we experience this process? We have full control over that. Full control. We get to decide that. And that's where the beauty of being within the light and understanding this and knowing this through the embodiment really starts to pay off. We can look at the past and we can live there in our mind, in our experience. We can experience all the resistance in the world. But we are going forward. We are moving forward. It is the shift of the ages that's really here. And how will you live this experience? Will you look back, as I often do after I've been through kind of traumatizing things, and think, okay, it was bad, but it wasn't really that bad. And in fact, I made it worse because I was in so much fear, so scared, so trying to protect myself by making excuses and being in that place of shame. But we don't have to be there. We can have a totally different experience of this reality now. So it's unfamiliar and it's awkward, and it's going to take time to understand and really realize how we can be within our joy expression. But this is our birthright. This is what we're here to do. So the sooner we recognize and understand this and kind of test that out, the more amazing it's going to be. So, okay. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.